Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. We'll be starting the session in another 5 minutes at max. Hello, everyone. Good evening. First of all, I wish to let you all know that the meeting is being recorded. I am Utkarsh. On behalf of Bangalore Collective, I welcome you all to our public talk, Electoral Bond Scheme and Democratic Transparency. We have with us Anjali Bhardwaj, co-convener, National Campaign for People's Right to Information, and Thomas Franco, former General Secretary of All India Bank Officers Confederation and a veteran in the banking industry. Bangalore Collective is a public forum of concerned citizens from in and around Bangalore, committed to upholding our constitutional rights as citizens of a democratic, pluralistic, and inclusive society. In the recent past, we have conducted discussions with prominent public figures, academicians, civil society organizations, farmer organizations, and labor unions. Some of our previous talks include public discussions on the farm laws, the citizenship amendment laws, the union budget, labor law reforms, and socioeconomic census, popularly known as the caste census. These talks can be accessed at our Facebook page. Our activities after the pandemic have not been as frequent as they ought to have been, but we are now slowly gathering pace to get back on track. Bangalore Collective is volunteer driven, and we would like to urge all of you to take part in organizing events as well. Interested participants can reach out to us after the event to discuss their interests and plan. We're also planning to have a volunteer meet soon. The details will be communicated to you. We request everyone to register their contact details to receive updates on our future activities. The topic of today's talk holds great significance. As the Lok Sabha election nears, voters are entitled to know how the controversial Electoral Bonds Scheme, EBS, in operation since 2017 and declared illegal only recently by a Supreme Court order, has impacted the electoral process and citizens' right to a free and fair election. Although belated, the court's order has exposed the manner in which individuals and corporate entities contributed funds to political parties under cover of anonymity. The donors, supposedly acting voluntarily, purchased bonds from the State Bank of India, SBI, and funneled them to a political party of their choice. Notably, the beneficiary parties were not required to disclose the donor's identity even to the Election Commission of India. The analysis of the data on contributions to the parties released by the Election Commission of India on March 15 and 17 revealed several patterns. First, it is obvious that the biggest beneficiary has been the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party or BJP. Second, an analysis of contracts, licenses, approvals issued by government agencies around the time of the donations revealed transactions that can be potentially construed as payoffs to political parties. Third, the revelations in the media about raids on several donors by enforcement agencies such as Enforcement Directorate, popularly known as ED, and the CBI and tax enforcement agencies around the time of these donations indicate the possible use of official agencies as instruments of extortion. Fourth, the fact that several of the bond purchasers have donated far more than their financial warrant and the possible Benami entities obviously implies that the donors created dubious legal entities behind which the actual funders hide. Even after the media revelations, the true extent of wrongdoing is not even clear. This is because only a full-blown inquiry can reveal the extent to which the government policy and its decision-making process has been held hostage under cover of an opaque scheme like electoral bond schemes. Moreover, there is a need for a court-monitored probe into all aspects of political funding, not just limited to the EBS. What are the structures, if any, that can be put on parties that have misused the 2019 electoral fund law during the elections? How can the parties, political as well as business interests, be made to compensate for the grave losses they have caused? I now invite Parvati Menon to initiate the proceedings by introducing the speakers for today's discussion. Parvati is a writer and former journalist. She was resident editor of the Hindu Bengaluru and also served as the London correspondent of the Hindu. Parvati, over to you.
Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yes, you are loud and clear, Parvati.
Okay. So thank you, Utkarsh, for your introduction. And I think we should go straight into the talk because Anjali has to leave early, and we would like her to speak and keep about 10-15 minutes for questions for her. I don't need to introduce Anjali Bhardwaj. She's co-convener of the National Campaign for People's Right to Information. Nor do I need to introduce Thomas Franco, who's the former General Secretary of the All India Bank Officers Confederation, and he now coordinates the People's Commission on Public Sector and Public Services. I think this is a good time. It's 2 months since the Supreme Court judgment. There's been a daily deluge of information on this massive fraud that has been perpetrated by the current government. And who better to do this than to sort of bring the many pieces of the corruption jigsaw together to give us the big picture, to stand. It's a good time to take stock of what is out there in the public sphere. And as I said, who better to do this than two people who know the issue well and have been involved in all this time, really, in making sense of it for the public. So, Anjali, would you like to begin? And you can maybe speak till about 5:35 or so, 5:35, 5:40, and then we'll have some time for questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Parvati, and thank you to all of you for having me here. It's an honor. I think we've sort of all been engaging with the whole issue, so that makes my task a lot easier. But let me just sort of start by laying the background a little bit in terms of where were we at before the electoral bonds scheme was introduced, and where do we go from here? I think we all recognize that in India, the fountainhead of corruption in many senses has been political party funding. And there have been various reasons for it, but primarily because if one looks at how political parties have been funded in our country for many decades now, is that there has been complete lack of transparency. And there are large companies, large corporates that are donating very large sums of money to political parties, which really act as kickbacks, as bribes to get what those companies want from political parties that are in power, that form governments. So we've had a situation where without citizens really knowing who's donating how much to which political party, lots of money has been received by political parties who are then in our democracy, instead of working in public interest, instead of making sure that they make policies, they make laws, they give contracts in the highest sort of levels of public interest, they are really working for the interest of some of these companies. And that was really a very big issue, which transparency activists, citizens who were concerned with electoral reforms, all have been saying for a very long time that this needs to change. When the BJP came to power in 2014, they came to power on the plank of anti-corruption. We all remember how there were many slogans that were given, including Bhashtachar Mukt Bharat, which is basically a corruption-free India. The Prime Minister famously saying, "Na khaunga, na khane dunga," and essentially promising that they would bring greater transparency in governance, including in political party funding. So when in 2017, there was talk of introduction of electoral bonds, there was some hope. There were still people who felt that these electoral bonds might be designed in a manner which will lead to greater transparency and therefore greater accountability in our political system. But when in 2017, there were amendments brought to 4 major laws, and these amendments were brought through the Finance Act of 2017, which means without any proper consultation, without any discussion in Parliament, all of us were left shocked. There were 4 laws that were amended: the RBI Act, the Representation of People's Act, Income Tax Act, and the Companies Act. And the kind of amendments that were brought to these laws were extremely regressive. For example, one of the big safeguards that had been introduced in the Companies Act was that not every company could donate to political parties. In order to make sure that there were no shell companies, there was no money laundering, there was a cap of 7.5% that was put on the previous 3 years of profits of a company, and only that much amount could be donated by a company to a political party. So this was a big safeguard that if a company had been in existence for at least 3 years and had been making a profit, and even then they could only donate up to 7.5% of the 3 years average profit that they had been making. So this was the safeguard which was there in the Companies Act, which was done away with when the amendment was brought to the Companies Act through the Finance Act of 2017. And essentially, this cap was removed. Similarly, there were changes that were made to the Representation of People's Act, the IT Act, and so on, by which it was made possible that electoral bonds, when they were introduced, could be completely anonymous. No citizen would know who was funding electoral bonds of what denomination to which political party. Yes, also no regulator would find out who was funding which political party. Now, this kind of really rang alarm bells amongst those, many of us who kind of engaged with this in 2017, looked at the Finance Act. And then in 2018, the Electoral Bonds Scheme was introduced. And this was really, in a sense, it laid out what was the structure of the Electoral Bonds Scheme, which was absolutely horrifying, because what the Electoral Bonds Scheme did, along with the 4 enabling amendments that were brought to the laws, to the 4 laws, was that it made way for opening the floodgates of completely anonymous, unlimited amount of funding to political parties. Now, it's worth understanding one of the reasons why earlier there was anonymity. The Income Tax Act and the RP Act, which is the Representation of People's Act, basically they have a limit up to which, if someone donates any money, the political party did not have to say who was donating money to it. So the IT Act, for example, states had a clause which said that any amount of donation that was made up to 10,000 rupees, the source of that donation did not have to be disclosed. So what was basically happening earlier was that large amounts of cash would be given by big companies. Let's say 100 crore rupees would be given by a big company to a political party. And this political party would, instead of showing it as getting cash from this company on its books, would basically just break this down into smaller packets of less than 10,000 rupees. So 9,900 rupees, there would be many vouchers. This is what can be referred to as creative accounting. So they would just make these thousands of vouchers, which were of the denomination of 9,900 or whatever, less than 10,000, and then say, look, we don't have to disclose who gave this money. So essentially, these large companies were giving giving large amounts of cash to get contracts for quid pro quo purposes, but the political parties would just break them down into smaller amounts, vouchers, and say that this is how we collected money and we don't have to disclose who gave us this money. Now, what was needed, therefore, was basically just removing this anonymity. And instead of that, what was brought was this electoral bond scheme, which said that the money that even comes through the banking channel, even that money would now become anonymized. Because we must remember that before electoral bonds came in, all the money that came through the banking channel, people could know. Anything above 10,000 would be very clearly told, and regulators would certainly know how much money was coming through the banking channels. Through the electoral bond scheme, the cash component, of course, still nobody knew what was happening, who was giving to whom, to which political party, but even the money that was coming through the banking channel became anonymous. And this was a big blow to people's right to information. So in the name of greater transparency, what the government ended up doing was to bring in a completely anonymous instrument by which any amount of money, thousands of crores of rupees, could be transferred to a political party, so long as it was done by through the use of electoral bonds, and it would all be anonymous both to citizens and to regulators. Now, before the electoral bond scheme came and even the laws were amended, the government took advice from the RBI and the Election Commission of India. We filed RTI applications which revealed that there was communication between the RBI and the Finance Ministry, between the Election Commission of India and the Finance Ministry, where both the RBI and the ECI raised very, very serious concerns with the electoral bond scheme. Essentially, the Reserve Bank of India said that this is going to result in money laundering. They said that this will lead to generation of black money, lead to creation of shell companies that will be set up solely with the purpose of giving donations to political parties. The Election Commission of India talked about how shell companies could be so dangerous, and about the fact that because even the ECI will not know who's funding which political party, they would not be able to regulate the funding of political parties at all. And the RBI really explained very clearly in those letters what the danger was. The problem is that although the electoral bond scheme says that no trading of bonds will be allowed, but in effect, there was no safeguard that was built into the electoral bond scheme to prevent this kind of trading from happening. So what would potentially happen is that if somebody wanted to give a large amount of cash to a political party, they would basically just request someone, work with someone who had money in the bank and was KYC compliant. So this purchaser would go to the SBI, which was the designated bank. They would give their KYC, they would purchase the bond, let's say 100 crore rupees worth of bonds, and would sell it to this person with cash, this company with cash, which would then give some consideration to the purchaser and would be the real donor who would give the electoral bond to the political party. So what was happening and potentially could have happened, and this was something that the RBI warned against even before the electoral bonds came into existence, when they looked at the scheme, was that this will lead to money laundering, where somebody who has cash will just buy for a consideration from someone who had money in the bank, who would be shown, who would become the purchaser of the electoral bond, and effectively their black money or their their cash would be used to buy electoral bonds and donate to any particular party. So what this would basically lead to is money laundering, and shell companies could be used to purchase these electoral bonds. These could be fly-by-night operators. Now, this is very significant because now we of course know that when the Supreme Court finally gave its judgment, it of course took a very long time for the judgment to come. But when the judgment has come, it's a landmark judgment. It's a seminal judgment because the court has basically struck down the Electoral Bond Scheme and the amendments that were made to the laws to bring in that scheme as being unconstitutional. The court has said that it violates Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution, which basically means that people have the right to free speech and expression, and the right to information flows from Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. So the court has basically said that if people don't have information, if voters don't know, then how are they supposed to cast their vote in an informed manner? And this is so significant because we know that most people in our country vote for parties, and parties are going to work for people who give them money. The Supreme Court, in fact, has even said it in its judgment that when large companies, large corporates are making donations to political parties, those donations are often done, would naturally be done for a consideration. They would have an expectation of a quid pro quo, where they would expect that when they give money to the political party will work for them, make policy for them, make laws for them, give them contracts. So if I, as a voter, I go and I have to cast my vote, unless I know who is funding which political party, I will not be able to know who political party is going to work for. So as a voter, I have a right to know, to be able to cast an informed vote in a democracy, that all the political parties in the fray, who is funding whom, so that I can make up my mind, who do I want to vote for, because I know who they are funded by and then who they are going to work for once they come into power. So the court has basically upheld people's right to information, and the court has basically said that electoral bonds, this entire instrument, lends itself to clientelism, to quid pro quo, where money is basically likely to change hands between. Donations are going to be made by companies, including loss-making companies, for the sole purpose of getting favors from the political party, especially the party in power, which has the ability to be able to make laws and policies and influence them. The Supreme Court, in its judgment, basically directed the banning of the sale of electoral bonds. So the electoral bond scheme was scrapped. But in addition, what the court also did was to say that retrospectively, all information from April 12, 2019, when it had given an interim order, all that information about who purchased the bonds and worth how much and on which date must be put in the public domain, and also who obtained those bonds, who received those bonds must be put in the public domain. And we know since then, Franco will be talking about it, so I will not go into much detail, how the SBI dragged its feet, tried to make sure that instead of giving the information within 3 weeks that the Supreme Court asked the SBI to do, the SBI tried to say that it will take us a very long time, and they tried to say that we'll give you the information after elections, 30th of June. Now, basically, this would have completely killed the effect of the Supreme Court judgment of information disclosure, because what the court was really trying to do was to make sure that we as citizens have a right to know, and therefore we get information before we go to cast our votes. So thankfully, the Supreme Court came down very strongly, and now, Parvati said, we have the information on the electoral bonds that were bought and received. And I want to say here that unfortunately, all the information is still not in the public domain. The information about electoral bonds that were bought before 12th April 2019. So between March 2018, when the electoral bonds were sold for the first time, and April 12, 2019, there were bonds worth 4,000 crores that were sold. And information about that, unfortunately, the court has still not directed the SBI to provide to people. So we know that a total of about 16,500 crore rupees worth of bonds have been, bonds have been bought for 16,500 crore rupees. Now we still don't have information for about 4,000 crore rupees. So about 25% of the information we still don't have. But yes, it's a very huge step. We have information about 75% of all the bonds that have been sold, the value of bonds that have been sold and received by political parties. The information, like we heard from Utkarsh, has been a huge revelation. It has confirmed all our fears. It has confirmed that there are clear trends to the manner in which donations have been made through electoral bonds. There is clearly a trend where large companies like Megha, the MEIL, was giving huge sums of money in very close proximity to the ruling party and getting contracts worth many thousands of crores of rupees, infrastructure projects, and so on. So we have seen that there's a very clear trend emerging from the information that is out there, that there was a very clear case of kickbacks potentially, of potential bribing, quid pro quo between companies that donated money and in very quick proximity got very large contracts worth thousands and thousands of rupees. So here, let me also say that what the preliminary investigations seem to be showing is that this scam, this entire electoral bond quid pro quo, is huge. It's amongst the largest, perhaps, scams that our country has seen, because 16,500 crore is just the kickback or the money that has been given to political parties. But what was given in return for that money, those huge projects. So if one were to estimate, anywhere between 4 to 5 lakh crore rupees worth of projects have been awarded to companies, it would appear right now at a very preliminary probe stage, that this amount of money, contracts worth lakhs of crores of rupees, were given to companies that were giving electoral bonds. So this really makes this electoral bond scam, as it is now being referred to, as perhaps the biggest scam our country has seen so far. And the other thing which is very concerning, the trend that is emerging, is that there is a clear involvement or appears to be a clear involvement of investigating agencies. So we are seeing a situation where there are companies that were being investigated by the ED, by the CBI, by the IT department, who these companies were being raided by the ED, CBI, and the IT department, and then they give money in very close, time frame to the BJP, which is the ruling party at the center, which in many ways controls these investigating agencies. So there can be only two reasons primarily for this kind of thing. One can be extortion, where the worry is that these ED, CBI, and IT might have been used by the ruling party to scare companies into giving them the BJP money. The other possibility is that these companies were doing wrong, and when they were raided by all these investigating agencies, they tried to give money to bribe the government and basically put their investigation and probe on the back burner, either go slow or shut down these investigations. Now, both of these are very, very worrying trends, which really deserve a very deep probe. Another issue which has come up is that new companies, which are less than 3 years old, have been donating money to political parties through electoral bonds. Now, this is a pure and clear violation of Section 182 of the Companies Act, which says that no company which is less than 3 years old can make a political donation to any political party. But what we are seeing is that these new companies, behind a veil of secrecy, when all this work was happening, when citizens didn't know who was giving money to which party, when regulators had no way, including the ECI and the IT department, of knowing who was giving money to whom, all this was happening, and which is a clear violation of, and it's a punishable offense under under the Companies Act. And loss-making companies, shell companies, appear to be giving large sums of money to political parties. There are companies that are giving many times more than their profits in terms of political donations, which is really raising the big worry about money laundering, whether these companies were actually being used to launder money, to sort of buy other companies, or were there shell companies that were being made so that some big companies did not have to give in their name, and black money could be routed and through these companies, and money laundering could happen. Now, all of this clearly shows that all the worries, all the fears and anxieties that were around the electoral bond scheme and the Supreme Court, the petitions that were put by Common Cause. I'm on the governing board of Common Cause, but ADR was the lead petitioner in this. ADR, Common Cause, there were other petitioners also. All of these organizations were repeatedly saying that the electoral bond scheme must be scrapped for these reasons. And when the information has come out today, it's in many ways confirming the worst fears that all of us had. And I think it's very important that citizens engage with this information, because that's really the purpose of this judgment, that the court intended for people to be able to know this information, to engage with it before they cast their vote. I think what this entire electoral bond scheme saga, if I may call it, has shown is the kind of institutional collapse that we are seeing in our country. I'm sure that Franco will be talking about it in detail, but certainly the role of the SBI has been so concerning, the largest bank in our country. The role of the ED, the CBI, all the investigating bodies seems to have come under a huge question mark. Their role needs to be investigated. And of course, the larger, role of the ECI, which earlier spoke against the bonds, but finally in court said we don't have a problem with it. And I always say that although we are very grateful that the Supreme Court has given this fantastic judgment, but I think that it has come so very late after we went through the 2019 general elections, after state elections have happened across the country, and now when the coffers of the political parties, and especially the BJP, the ruling party at the center, which has amassed a lion's share of the electoral bonds, and we are going into another general election. I think that this judgment should have come much earlier so that people's right to information could have been upheld. The level playing field that has been destroyed through electoral bonds could have been prevented. So I will stop here. Thank you very much. I realize that I'm out of time.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anjali. You have said elsewhere, not today, that the demand now should be the setting up of a court-monitored special investigation team, SIT. And you say that's the only body that can really get to the bottom of this whole thing and that will have access. But what about in the interim? We are in the middle of we're going into election. It's already started. And you've said that as citizens we must engage with this. How can this huge information that we have, and very solid information in the public sphere, how can that give traction to the election campaign? And can concrete demands be made for the interim? An SIT will take, one doesn't know how long that will take, and we don't know whether under the new dispensation that comes, whether how far they will allow such a body to work. So is there anything that is more concrete that can be done? Simple things, filing complaints, citizens filing complaints, and even or do you think that it's too complicated and it has to be done? The investigation has to take its course. And
yes, Parvati, I think that's a very important question, because you're right. The timing is such, like I mentioned, that the judgment has come, but it is so very close on the heels of the coming election that we really need to think how this information can be used best by citizens. So I'd like to say 2 or 3 things. One is that why do we say that a court-monitored SIT is probably what is required, and the demand for the court-monitored SIT? Because like I said, the role of the investigating agencies, and the ED, the CBI are our premier investigating agencies. The role of these very agencies today needs to be investigated. So who is going to do that? If we were to go and file a complaint to the ED or the CBI and expect them to take this up, how fair will that be? How will they examine their own role in, which there's a very murky trend that has emerged. If you recall, there was a huge demand for the Lokpal, in fact, on the back of which the BJP came to power in 2014. And the Lokpal, of course, was set up, but the whole idea behind setting up a Lokpal was that there should be an independent and empowered body to look into cases of big ticket corruption like electoral bond scam. Now, what has happened to the Lokpal? For the first 5 years, the BJP government did not appoint anyone as a Lokpal. And after that, every time they have made an appointment, it has been by a government-dominated committee, which means that the people who have been appointed as Lokpal themselves don't enjoy the kind of public trust where the people believe that they will work independently of the government, because they've been appointed by a predominantly government-led selection committee. So we are at a situation, therefore, today that nothing short of a court-monitored probe is likely to have the kind of public trust that is needed and be able to do that work. And you're right, like I said, it took us more than 7 years to get this judgment from the Supreme Court. I don't know how long it will take for an SIT to be set up and then for it to do its work and then for it to put its findings out. And this certainly needs probe. I mean, there is no question about it. But I think what we are seeing in terms of investigative journalists, especially in the alternate media, in the social media, and those who are on platforms, social media platforms, do is a stellar job, despite the fact that, much of the mainstream media, with a few honorable exceptions that we all know, there's a complete blackout of some of these discussions that should be happening. All of this information, one would have thought, if the media was free and independent, this would have been plastered all over vernacular, over English media and everywhere, so that everyone could have engaged and understood what was happening. That's not there. But I think the investigative stories that are coming out are very crucial. We need to use every platform, including the kind of discussion we are having today, but much more at a huge scale, to be able to take this information to people, to be able to explain to them. And you see, the problem is that with the mainstream media, the kind of propaganda that has been happening, it's almost as if there's no corruption in our country anymore. So if you talk to anyone, we'll be told that no corruption exists anymore. This has really, I mean, it's the biggest indictment. The Supreme Court itself has said that this was an unconstitutional, illegal scheme by which money was being amassed, which was really quid pro quo and clientelism. So I think that this needs to be explained. It needs to be carried down to every single village, to slum, to every colony in the country.
Just a quick announcement. Whoever would like to ask questions, please put it in Anjali's session. Please put it, post your questions in the chat box. Anjali, another question has come in. What has been the role of mainstream political parties in combating this scheme? I mean, other than the BJP, obviously. And I mean, there's only one party that stood against, that right from the word go said it would have nothing to do with this, with the electoral bond scheme. That was the CPIM, and it was also a petitioner, if I'm correct. But what about other political parties? How far have they been using this institution?
So, Parvati, I mean, the simple answer to that would be that, unfortunately, despite many warnings from transparency groups, political parties in general went ahead and said that if we are going, as long as the scheme exists, if we are going to get funds through electoral bonds, we take them. Like you said, the CPIM refused to take electoral bonds, and they were also a petitioner in the Supreme Court. But apart from that, we've seen that political parties, by and large, have received electoral bonds. I think that it's very important that political parties understand how there is a complete destruction of the level playing field, and how there is a complete attack on people's right to information, and therefore also on their own chances of reaching out to people to be able to get votes in a level playing field in a democracy. They need to be far more vigilant in future. Unfortunately, with the electoral bond scheme, we did not see the kind of role that they ought to have been playing, apart from, like you said, the CPIM.
Another question. The arrest of Arvind Kejriwal on the basis of allegations made by a prime donor the bonds.
Sorry, Parvati, can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear now.
Yes.
You heard the question?
Yes, I heard the question largely. So, Sarat Chandra Reddy, who is one of the main approvers in the Delhi liquor scam case, who has turned approver, is a person whose company has given 55 crores. His companies have given more than 55 crore rupees to the BJP. Now, this really raises such huge questions on the veracity of his statement, because what we saw was that in November 2022, he got arrested. And then in May 2023, after giving electoral bonds of 5 crore rupees to the BJP, he got bail, which was not opposed by the ED. So his bail, the question he said, the reason why he got bail was medical grounds. He had lower back pain. Now we know how the ED goes ahead and fights against any kind of bail being given to people. Usually, he was a prime suspect. He was given bail, not opposed by the ED. And then after he gave bail, he was given bail. He turned approver. He was pardoned, and he sort of gave, his companies gave another 50 crore rupees. Different companies gave another 50 crore rupees to the BJP. Now, more investigation, which has come out yesterday, seems to suggest that that also was used by his company to influence policy. So the whole thing is very murky. And, to have chief ministers in our country behind bars just before elections raises such doubts on the free and fair nature of elections that we are going into. And to see that one of the chief ministers, the ex-deputy chief minister, and many ministers in the Delhi government who are behind bars today, one of the main people whose statement is being used has, all this information has come out about him, of his donating to the ruling party at the center through electoral bonds. I think it raises very serious questions, and very, very serious questions, certainly on the veracity of his statement as an approver in this case.
Yeah. Is there any possibility of meaningful reform in regards to electoral funding in the existing economic structure of our country?
Yes, this is no easy answers to this. Let me begin with that disclaimer, because, Baba Sahib Ambedkar had said that we all might have one person, one vote, but if we have the kind of inequalities that, seem to be getting exacerbated every single day. I mean, there are few families in our country who are holding more than 50% of the country's wealth. In a situation like that, I mean, how is it one person, one vote? And we are seeing through the entire electoral bond saga how few companies, few individuals seem to be influencing policy making, laws being made, and so on. So I think that when we are talking about reforms and in political party funding, it's a very, very, very difficult question. Yes, I mean, can it be done? Of course. There are at least two kinds of reforms that can be done immediately. One is there should be no anonymity in political party funding, no cap of 10,000, 20,000, below which they don't get to declare who gave them money, etc. Any anonymity should be done away with. which is really what we had hoped will be done. The second thing, which they keep saying that cash is a big problem, because cash doesn't have to be always accounted for. See, cash in itself is not a problem, but the fact that it doesn't come through the banking channels, it very often is not accounted for, is something that becomes a problem. So one of the solutions that has also been suggested is that when the government has been going so strong on digital payments, expecting even the poorest person on the street to transact money digitally, then why not political parties? Why should political parties not deal with all kinds of money, whether it is donations that they get, or it is money that they spend in through banking channels, digital money, not through cash. Now, this is a bit of a radical solution, but it's something that everyone in the country is having to deal with. So to be able to bring about greater transparency, cleaning up of the system, this would be something that would be useful. And of course, we are not living in a fool's paradise. Like I said, with this kind of inequality, there will still be cash that will flow to political parties, but at least let's say that it is totally illegal. And at least let's say that no amount of money can come into a political party, can be found with a political party, unless it is accounted for to the citizens of India, because there has to be transparency in no anonymity at all. So I think these are steps that need to be undertaken.
So here, maybe this can be the last one. We know the major beneficiary is the BJP. But there are certain other political parties who are in power and have enjoyed these bonds. Would they support a major probe, if a major probe is demanded by the Congress and Communist parties under the monitoring by the Supreme Court?
Well, I think, it's not really a question of any party supporting the demand for the probe. Of course, the CPIM went to court against these bonds, but even declaring them unconstitutional, there were civil society groups like ADR Common Cause who went to court, citizens groups that demanded this, and the Supreme Court heard it on its on its merits, and has passed these directions, the judgment. So I think that every single political party that has taken bonds needs to be, all bonds that were bought and received need to be investigated. One can't say that it has to be only for a political part, for one political party. Yes, of course, we know that the ruling party at the center has got more than 50% of all the bonds transacted, but other parties have also got it. And if there is a quid pro quo there, and which does seem to be appearing in many cases, then that also deserves an investigation and proper action to happen. So it's, if it was left up to political parties, we wouldn't have even seen this judgment, most political parties. So we only hope that the Supreme Court will take this up when, this matter goes up to the court.
So we will now let you go, Anjali. We know that you have another.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Parvati, and thank you all for your patience. I'm really sorry that I have to leave, but I will watch the recording later of everything that transpires.
Thank you. Thank you again. May I now ask Ms. Franco to.
Yes. Very good evening. A very good evening to all. Thanks to Comrade V. Sridhar and the Bengaluru Collective for giving me an opportunity to have these interactions with you. Comrade Anjali has narrated whatever happened through these electoral bonds, what all has happened, and you are all a very educated audience who must be reading day and night in the newspaper, which the newspapers bring out very little, but at least in the online newspapers and the social media, so much of information. So what I say here may be known to you all so much. But I would like to start with the way this electoral bond scheme was introduced. As pointed out by Anjali, initially the Reserve Bank of India and the Election Commission of India wrote to the government of India against issuing these electoral bonds, bringing that amendments to 4 laws and introducing the electoral bonds. Here, what exactly RBI said was that Reserve Bank of India is the only authority which has powers to print currency, and once you are issuing an electoral bond and whatever bond you are issuing as a bearer bond, it is against the convention in this country that only the currency is traded as bearer instrument. Other than that, nobody has the authority to issue instruments which can be traded without any what you call the knowledge of who is purchasing, who is selling, and all that. But unfortunately, the government did not listen to them. But subsequently, what the Reserve Bank of India has been doing is much more alarming. Now they don't bother at all about what the public opinion is, what the laws are, and the way the Reserve Bank's governor is giving statements and all. RBI is no more an independent body. We know already about the ED, CBI, and income tax authorities. But RBI is also one of the arms of the government today, and it only defends whatever wrongdoings are done by the government of India. And the board itself is a lopsided board with Mr. S. Gurumurthy there in the board, who had been commenting here that after this electoral bond issue, when SBI was not giving the details, he was saying that in the digital era, it is very difficult to tally everything and give. I hope these are the people who promoted digitalization so much, and now say Gurumurthy was saying that it is very difficult in a digitalized world to tally and bring out all this. It's very surprising. So RBI is no more neutral. It has become an one-sided organization. But more to be worried is the functioning of State Bank of India. The State Bank of India was asked to provide the data after the Supreme Court judgment. Till that time, whatever secrecy is to be maintained, yes, they should maintain, they have maintained, that's fine. But the Supreme Court order said that the electoral bond scheme is unconstitutional and manifestly arbitrary. And the Supreme Court gave an order asking the State Bank of India to provide the details. Unfortunately, they did not cover the period before February 2019, though the electoral bond schemes came into effect from 2018 itself. So whatever data was to be provided, the State Bank of India first made the biggest blunder of saying that we require 4 months to tally all this and submit the data. 4 months means let the election be over, after that we will. Now, technically, that time itself, I was also questioning in the media, and everybody was questioning. How in a digital era the bank which is a pioneer in digital banking say that it is so difficult to tally this and it requires months of time to tally. Practically, this is tallied on a daily basis and the bonds were to be issued only on fixed period. That again, there has been violation. But it is subject to audit and within the banking system, even a clerical staff will be able to tell you how easily these figures can be arrived at. Now, subsequently, Harish Salve, one of the highest paid lawyers in this country, comes to the Supreme Court on behalf of State Bank of India and says that it's a real difficult process. We are maintaining it in 2 silos. Give us at least 4 weeks time. From 4 months, he comes to 4 weeks. Then the judge tells him that there is no way you can have more time. And they are questioning also, what you have been doing till now? By that time, it was 21 days of the order. How many you have tallied so far? Tell us. He did not have a reply. And the order was that by next day, it should be provided. And State Bank could provide it next day itself. Only thing, there also they tried to cook up. They gave it in 2 batches and without matching them. Again, the Supreme Court had to intervene, say that you provide all the data with all details, including the number which is encrypted in that bonds. And once that was out, everybody could. I really thank the Reporters Collective and the team of people who have worked so hard to immediately tally everything and provide us so much of information. So here, the role of State Bank of India is really a, what you say, shocking decision they had taken. But I would like to explain what would have happened. State Bank of India, the decision on this would be taken only by the chairman State Bank. Mr. Dinesh Kumar Kara, the present chairman, is already on an extension. And there has been already criticism that he was given extension only because Adani was given 34,000 crores fresh credit after the Hindenburg report. So he must have been threatened that unless you hide these things, you will get into trouble. There could have been an offer that you will get one more extension or you will get another appointment somewhere. There are so many avenues today. Because of that, he could have done that, and you can always threaten a MD or a chairman using the ED, CBI, IT. So that way, there has been a coercive step through which this bank chairman has been put into this difficulty, and he has brought disgrace to State Bank of India. There has been instances earlier when R.K. Talwar was the chairman State Bank of India. During the emergency period, when Pranab Kumar Mukherjee, then Minister of State for Finance, called up Mr. R.K. Talwar and said that Sanjay Gandhi is interested in a particular loan, please sanction that. The R.K. Talwar bluntly refused. He was asked to resign, he refused to resign also. So there has been honest chairmen like that, and bank had been standing upright. But unfortunately, in the recent past, the chairmen have become so crazy about their future. We have seen Madam Arundhati Bhattacharya, the then chairman of State Bank of India, after retirement, she goes and sits in the board of Reliance, to which huge amount of credit was given by the State Bank of India. Earlier to that, Mr. O.P. Bhatt was chairman State Bank of India, gave a huge credit to Tatas when Tatas also got into a crisis, and till date he continues to be in the board of partners. So these are the ways today the system has become corrupt, and the senior executives in the bank, they are no more neutral, they are no more honest. That is very unfortunate for the banking system. The banking system is working on faith. And if the faith on the system goes, then the banking system will collapse. The faith went down with the demonetization. Then there has been so much of accusations regarding the write-offs which are taking place, how the haircuts are taking place, helping the borrower who is a looter, and again handing it over to another person who is doing well and with a cheap rate. So that way this banking system has been losing its credibility, and with this electoral bond scheme, the issue has become more blatantly known that the banks are not doing their business honestly. I don't want to go into the details of other ways in which this banking system has been affected after the Modi government took over. But one thing we have to see is that the banking system today is getting into a crisis in spite of the image being shown by the finance minister as well as the prime minister that it has become robust, it is doing so well. The banking system has become the public sector banks especially have become banks for the rich, for the corporates, whereas they run on the deposits of common man. The common man, so deposit alone is used for giving loans. Without loan, there is no bank. And the beneficiaries are always now rich people. Small credit has become very rare. Priority sector lending is going down. So that way, the banking system is getting into a crisis, which we might know only after the election results are over. Another aspect I would like to highlight and then complete my talk is that what is much more worrying is not corruption, the way extortion is taking. The data which has come into public domain today shows that the BJP has been doing an extortion racket. It's like showing you the knife and stealing from an ordinary person. You threaten with ED, CBI and income tax authorities, and people are turning and giving so much of electoral bonds. That is not good for the country, and this aspect has to be told to the public more. And at what, whose cost and what cost? It is at the cost of the common man. A medicine production company goes and gives electoral bond. The price of medicine is increased. Spurious medicines are supplied to the public. The textile company goes and gives. The cost of textile goes up. And road sector, somebody is going and giving. The toll gets increased. Like that, in every field, if you see the entire list of people who have given bonds, they have used these bonds to put the burden on the common man, and the common man has been affected in various ways. So, it is time that the country wakes up. In spite of all this, this man every day is saying that the opposition is corrupt. I am giving a corruption-free country, corruption-free government. I don't know with what authority he could speak like that, looking at the face of people. How you can keep on uttering lies after lies. Electoral bond is only, as mentioned by some of the journalists, it is only at the tip of the iceberg. there has been much more scams, much more corruption, and much more extortions taking in this place by the government, which has really become a fascist government. And the only way we can save our country and save democracy is to get rid of this government in the ensuing elections. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Painting this picture of how the banking sector have facilitated the scam, really oiled the wheels for the government. We have a question for you from one of the someone in the audience. For decades, the unions in banks have played a role as whistleblowers of wrongdoing in the banking industry. Example, during the Harshad Mehta scam in the 1990s. For the last several years, the nomination of employee directors has been abandoned. How has this contributed to banks acting against public interest, especially in the public sector banks, and more particularly the SBI?
After nationalization, every public sector bank, including State Bank of India, is to have a workman director representing the non-officer category and an officer director who is called a non-workman director in the board. And those persons have been quite effective in questioning and especially the rightly used word whistleblower role they have played in the board meetings, because in the board meeting takes place almost every week, and the entire decision making is shared with the board of directors. Large loans given, large write-offs given, policy decisions, everything is there in the board, and both this employee and officer director may not be having the majority to change the course of the board, but because they were there was a fear in the management and they were careful. But unfortunately, exactly in 2014, this government, when it came to power, it decided not to appoint officer director and employee director. We kept on writing. We met the finance minister and gave representation. Then finance minister Arun Jaitley. Nothing happened, and on behalf of All India Bank Officers Confederation, in 2017, I filed a case in the Delhi High Court, which is being handled by Mr. Prashant Bhushan. Initially, the court was very positive. They said that within 6 months, these appointments should take place. But for 7 years, this government has found some way or other by giving some reply saying that we require this thing, that time. They say that the recommendations are obsolete now, the time has elapsed. Now they don't have 3 years residual service. Some way or other, they are not allowing it to happen. The case is again coming up on April 16. But because of this, the system has become so opaque, and a lot of mistakes are taking place within the banking system. And I only hope that this government goes and that practice is revived again.
Another question. One of the reasons why the RBI initially opposed the EBS was because the bonds were freely transferable, enjoying all the attributes of cash in the economy. Since the RBI is the sole custodian of the national currency, it would have been within its remit to check any instrument that threatened to rival the national currency. How did the RBI tone down its objections to the scheme, which were an affront to its authority?
As I mentioned in the beginning, RBI, and Anjali also mentioned, RBI did write to the government that don't bring this kind of a scheme. It is against the principles of banking. and only RBI is entitled to issue currency, and this is equivalent to a currency. But unfortunately, the RBI has seen so much of changes. Even people who were so loyal to the present government were forced to quit the post of chairman and leave. And the entire board is being filled with their own type of person the RBI governor today is. During the demonetization, he was economic affairs secretary, and every day he was meeting the press and telling stories that everything is in order. He introduced some funny system that more than 4,000 rupees you should not give to a person, and every day he will come. So start using indelible ink so that they don't come back again. Like that, funny things he did. And now he is RBI governor. Again, he is also under extension. So the entire RBI system has become also totally a tool of the present government. That's a reality we are seeing.
Are there any other questions for Comrade? You have said that, you're suggesting that the RBI, SBI, etc. Have been almost captured by elements who are willing to, go along with these forms of corruption. What about the role of the unions here? How has the unions responded? I mean, the banking sector has had a very long history of unionization and union activism.
Well, the banking sector, trade unions have been questioning many of these, and in spite of announcing that 2 public sector banks will be privatized 2 years before itself by the finance minister in the budget speech, till now privatization has not taken place because of the opposition from the trade unions. Banking sector still has strong trade unions under the umbrella of United Forum of Bank Unions. Probably the only trade union movement in this country sector-wise which can paralyze the entire system, because everybody participates in this strike. But unfortunately, they are also writing, questioning, but it has not been very effective. For example, when the FRDI bill, Financial Resolution and Deposit Insurance Bill came, the unions, all of the unions were not ready to fight. But the All India Bank Officers Confederation started the fight, went to the streets, explained to people, appeared before the Joint Parliamentary Committee, and then the other trade unions also came around. They also appeared in the JPC, and that way we could get the FRDI bill withdrawn from the Parliament. Much before the Farm Bill's withdrawal, this could happen because of this banking sector trade unions. But during this particular course, they were so busy with the wage revision negotiations that they did not want to utter a word or write any letter. That is very unfortunate. But I am hopeful that now the banking sector trade unions will take up the issue a little more strong. And if the board of director case is won, then they get into the board, they can be more effective. But I do agree that the trade unions in the banking sector have to play a better role in these issues.
Thank you. And I thank you very much for that very interesting. I think now we'll wind up, and I will hand the floor back to Utkarsh, who will give us, will sum up and give us a vote of, thank our speakers. Darsh?
Thank you, Parvati. Thank you so much, Franco. I thank on behalf of the Bengaluru collective, I thank everyone in the audience and the speakers for giving their time to the event. We'll be soon back with one more interesting talk in a few days. As we mentioned earlier, the Bengaluru collective is a volunteer-driven organization. We can be contacted through the phone numbers and emails that are coming in the chat box. This session was recorded and the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel. The YouTube channel link is also there in the chat box. We'll see you soon and we'll come back with more interesting topics and discussions which are socially and politically relevant for us as citizens of this country. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Franco. Thank you, Parvati.
Thank you very much.